Okay, so as I said, I'm going to give my life story, which, as I mentioned previously, how I have a feeling that just about everything in my life has focused on this moment right here and now. All of my learning, all my experiences, and so on. And specifically, I think it is to explain Sister Renee's amazing photograph. Sister Renee had a prophetic experience when she took this photograph outside her home on Super Bowl Sunday. And later on, by the way, one of our members is a part of this drama, and he is also going to give his experiences. And this is the photograph Sister Renee received, and this was a big cause of contention, as you know. I've got it right side up.
Yes.
Roxanne said it wasn't.
We have a glare.
Oh, you got a glare?
Oh.
Off of this?
A little bit of one.
That's okay.
Oh, I thought you meant I had it upside down, Roxanne. All right. Okay, very good. Well, the contention was that this is an extremely unusual picture. I mean, she sent it to me immediately, and I posted it, as many of you know. This was on Super Bowl Sunday. And she said, I got a photograph of a crucifix in the sky. And I says, wonderful, send it over and I'll put it on YouTube, which she did. And this is what came out, except that it didn't look at all like this. I should have her original photograph. I'll show her original photograph later. It was much smaller than this. This is what came out after I blew it up and started examining it. The contentious part is at the very bottom of the crucifix, there is a naked harlot. And when I mentioned that to Sister, she was aghast. I said, there's no image in the entire history of Christian art of a naked harlot at the foot of the cross. And of course she's right, and I was just as shocked as she was. But because of my years and years of experience in sculpture and in art, I recognized it was a naked harlot. Well, there's only one naked harlot in the Bible, and that's in the book of Revelation. And it refers to primarily the United States and Britain. And what this photograph was telling me is that the United States will be burned with fire before we acknowledge Jesus as our Savior, as someone who died on the cross for us. Not only that, before Protestant America, the harlot accepts Jesus on a crucifix, in other words, which is a Catholic symbol. Well, to reach this point, in my understanding, I may be one of the very few people in the entire planet who would interpret it that way. And I think the Lord planned it that way. In other words, I would understand that that is a possibility. There is nudity in art. We see it, for example, in the Sistine Chapel where the Pope says Mass. Michelangelo did a lot of famous nude figures. And as an art student, of course, I learned early on, 50 years ago, that, in fact more than that, 60 years ago, that the human form is the most perfect and the most beautiful in all of nature. And why wouldn't it be otherwise? Because we are made in the image and likeness of God. So every artist has to study anatomy. And Michelangelo did. He worked on cadavers. He took bodies apart, cut them up to understand the musculature and so on. So I've taken live classes with live models in 5 different art schools. I went to Columbia University. I graduated in 1960. It was optional, but I majored in fine arts. In high school, I was really good in math. When I got to college, I wasn't so good. But I found that my art understanding was much better than my understanding of mathematics. And whereas I was getting C's and D's in math in Columbia, I started getting A's when I took art classes. And one of the classes we took was a life class, it's called. And we had both male and female models. And now that was a painting class. And I soon found out that I did not get really good marks in that class because I'm colorblind. It is hard to be an artist and colorblind. But I did find out that as a sculptor, you don't have to worry about color. I mean, you just you either accept the color of the material that you're working with, or you give it an uniform color. I also took art classes following that in Syracuse University. We had a wonderful professor. His name was It's pretty close to Michelangelo. I think it was Angelo D'Angelo. And his last name was D'Angelo. He was from Italy, and he knew sculpture. And he was an excellent teacher. And in fact, he inspired me to continue in sculpture. And we did quite a few life models. And I know at the end of the class, I thought I had done very well. I mean, you look at the other students, and none of them knew how to do sculpture, even though they listened to him. But I listened to everything he said. If you listen to your professor, it doesn't matter where you are. For example, when I was in the Army on the rifle range, I had never fired a rifle before in my life. But I listened to everything word the sergeant said. And by the time I got through the 3 weeks of basic training on the rifle range, I was firing expert. And in fact, it got me a 3-day pass. The only reason is because I listened to the professor. You listen, he tells you, and the other people don't listen. They fire it the way they thought they'd already been raised on the farm. I'm going to do it this way, boom, you know. And they're not accurate. Well, I was accurate because I listened to him. Well, it's the same way with sculpture. This Professor D'Angelo, he told us how to do it. And I listened to every word he said. Well, anyway, I did quite a few good sculptures in that class. And we had quite a few live models, as I say, male and female. So at the end of the class, I was down at the corner restaurant off campus, and quite a few of the other classmates were there. And one of them came up to me, and she said, "What kind of a grade did Mr. D'Angelo give you?" I said, I don't know what was wrong. He said, "He only gave me a B." She said, "What? He never gives more than a C." So he gave me the highest grade he probably ever gives. So that I was so happy when she told me that. I mean, I'm sure the Lord put her there to let me know, because I was discouraged. I wasn't going to follow sculpture anymore. Well, anyway, since then I've taken life classes at New Paltz State University in New York State. I've taken art classes at the Munson Williams Art Proctor in Utica, New York. I've been to the Art Students League. All 5 of those college university settings, I have worked from a life model. So it's nothing new to me. There's a lot of rules, because let's face it, we're all fallen human beings. I mean, Adam and Eve were naked, and then they realized they were naked, and they had to put clothes on. So there are a lot of rules. You don't take photographs, and you have to respect the model, and everybody knows that. And I didn't see anything harmful in it. I would, if I had an art school, I would do the same thing. You have to learn anatomy. Now, there was one problem. The professor, any of the professors I had, even though they knew their business, even though they understood art, they were not artists themselves. In other words, when they did a pose, when they would pose the model, and they'd invariably make the model into an easy pose for the students. For example, they might put the hand next to the shoulder, or the hand next to the body somehow. This makes it much easier. It's much more difficult for a sculptor to put a hand out like this. You have to figure out the structure of the model. Well, anyway, none of my professors ever did that. They always had and it's a meaningless pose. It's good for academic work. So I realized soon on that if I was ever going to be an artist and say something and do something meaningful, I would have to get my own model. And that's what I did. When I was at New Paltz, they had live models all the time, a lot of different classes. And I sent the word around to the models that would any of them be willing to pose for me in the evening, off duty, so to speak. And one of them was more than willing, a very attractive model. She says, "Oh, sure, I'll pose for you." I said, "Great," and we set up an evening class. The school was more than happy to let people have their own models, set up their own work, and so on. So we were going along fine, and in fact, upstairs you'll see what the result of that, because so I had this full-size model, and I had her exactly the pose I wanted and everything, even though it was difficult. She was doing just what I wanted. By the way, I'll show you how it works. To get an interesting pose, you have to use the Greek ideals, and it's also Renaissance, and that is contrapposto. You move the body, and I told the model stands there, you shift your weight to the right, or shift your body to the right. Then you shift your upper body to the left, and then you put your head back. It's kind of awkward, but it makes much more interesting pose. Then I say, put your weight on one leg, so you bend one knee, you bend the other knee. So it's quite interesting just setting up the model.
Yeah.
Once she gets the pose, it's much more interesting than what the professors had. So anyway, we're working along fine, and she posed for me, I would say 5 or 6 times, and the sculpture was going great. And then one day, and of course you always talk with your model, because modeling is about as boring an occupation as there is. All you do is just sit there and look like a dumb frog on a log, you know what I mean? So in order to keep her interested, to have a lively expression, you talk back and forth. And it's usually interesting anyway, and you just make small conversation all the while I'm working. Well, this one day, or evening actually, she was telling me about an automobile accident she had been in. I said, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So she's talking along. She's saying that she permanently hurt her back and she has a twist in her back. I said, gee, I I don't notice that. And well, she says, come on over here and look at it. And I said, oh, okay. So I go over and look at it, and she says, see, can't you see that twist in my backbone? I said, no, I really don't see it. I'm about to go back to do my modeling. She said, well, put your hand right there. And I said, wait a minute. I am not going to touch this naked woman. I mean, she's very attractive. It's hard enough in the first place to keep your mind on your work. I said, no, thanks. I said, I believe you. So I went back. So I go back and continue my work. She never came back again. She would never pose again for me. I guess one of the requirements was that I grab her on the back and feel her spine, whether it was straight or not. I wasn't going to do that. So anyway, to make a long story short, what I decided is that if I were ever going to have a model pose the way I wanted, there would have to be some kind of an intimate connection. I would think. I mean, the model seemed to wanted some kind of a connection, and I said, I think probably every artist has sooner or later come to this conclusion that he should either be promiscuous, be somebody like Picasso, or you marry your model, which would be the Christian point of view. And I can see, I told my brother that once, and I said, Jim, I says, if you want a model, have your wife pose for you naked. And he says, I don't think she could stand still, and I know I couldn't. So maybe that wouldn't work either. So actually, since then, ever since then, really, I've been asking attractive young ladies that I know to pose for me, just to do a portrait, just to see if they liked posing and if I was good at it. And as we go through the gallery upstairs, you'll see I have had quite a few young ladies pose for me, and some of them have posed for life models. There's a large full-size sculpture in the lobby. Well, what I am leading up to is the understanding of Sister Renee's photograph, and that is very few people in the country would have seen the naked harlot because it's in a cloud, but I studied the photograph very carefully. I know I'm right about it, and in fact, St. Therese has verified that for me. I think I told you about the dime, finding the dime. That's how I asked for verification from Sister Renee. And you say, in fact, I learned this, I think, from Sister Renee, St. Therese, I should say. I learned from Sister Renee that you do a 5-day novena and you ask for a sign. So I specifically asked for a sign if this was correct, what I was discovering about Sister Renee's photograph. And I told you that on the 5th night, I was walking along, and I got the locution. Sort of, it's not, I don't hear it in your voice, but it's like a message. And the message was, look for a dime. I said, oh, okay. So I made 2 steps, and there was a washer on the sidewalk. It looked just like a dime. It was getting dark. So I picked it up, and I said, well, that's a verification. It's not exactly a dime, but it's obviously a message from St. Therese. So I did a video on that, but I did not, I don't think I showed the naked harlot in that one. I think I just interpreted the rest of the photograph. But then I think it was after that I saw, if I remember correctly, the harlot in the picture. And so then I really had to ask St. Therese. I mean, I said, should I really proceed with this interpretation? And I started another 5-day novena. And on the second day, up where I take the walk along the Cedar River, in the parking lot, right there at the near my truck, there was a real dime. I said, okay, St. Therese, I know I'm on the right track now. So, and that's why I did my video, and that's why I have done my interpretation of her photograph. This is the bone of contention. I think Sister Renee will eventually understand where I'm coming from and where the Lord is coming from. In other words, it's not, I really don't consider my interpretation. Now maybe my drawing is too sensuous, or I'm not sure, but I am convinced, and St. Therese has verified, that there is a naked harlot at the foot of this cross, and there is a very important significance to it, and that is that she represents the naked harlot in the book of Revelation, which is primarily the United States, and that she will not repent, she will not embrace the crucifix until after she is burned with fire. And that is the significance of this photograph. It's a very sobering photograph. So, with that introduction, I think what I will do, I will give you a tour of my gallery, and with that understanding of where I'm coming from, you can look at, you'll see some of the original sculptures that I did, you'll see some of the photographs, you'll see, and I might as well mention the abstracts, because there are quite a few abstracts that you see outdoors, and then there are quite a few upstairs. Since I don't have a model, I have, in recent years, gravitated toward abstract sculptures, and they are unique, and I believe they are just as valid as life. Any kind of sculpture you do from life, whether it's a portrait or a full-size model, or let's say Michelangelo's David, there is a front and a back, for example. The front is always more interesting, and we all know that. The back is less interesting. When you see a published photograph, let's say of Michelangelo's David, 95% of the time they show it from the front. But the back is just as much hard work, but it is not as significant. With abstract sculpture, it's quite different. Every side must be interesting. And in fact, with my sculptures, there are at least 4 fronts to them. So although you lose, you don't have the advantage of the beauty of the human form, which comes from God. You do have an abstract beauty. It's very similar to music. Music is not realistic. I mean, except for maybe like Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, where you have instruments imitating birds, like Sam does sometimes, imitating a bird. But for the most part, but that's my rationale for doing abstract sculpture. So let's take a break, and we'll go up and take a look at my upstairs gallery. So you
Can I
people,
ask you a question before?
okay, Lawrence has a question. Go ahead.
So your abstract art out here,
Mm-hmm.
you said it's all based on human?
Well, and to a degree it is. There are human forms there, but what I'm saying, it does not imitate one of the major characteristics of a human form, and that is there is a front and a back to a human form. There is no front or back to an abstract sculpture. So you lose that aspect of humanity, but you gain the fact that it is interesting all the way around. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what do they represent? When you're that kind of abstract there, what are you trying to say?
Right, okay. Almighty God expresses himself abstractly, specifically in numerology. For example, there are 3 shapes in the universe. All shapes in the universe can be boiled down to squares, triangles, or circles. And when I say squares, I mean, 3 oblongs and so on. It can be but in other words, 90-degree angles, sharp angles, and circles. So I use those 3 forms. There are 3, what else am I trying to say? Well, anyway, that's how God expresses himself. in mathematics and in architecture.
Yeah,
and
Trinity.
a trinity of forms. So that's what I base my sculpture on, are those three forms. It's an abstract expression of
Oh, I see.
Almighty God. And although, as you just by looking at a photograph of an abstract sculpture is misleading. You will look at it and say that is not as important as, let's say, Michelangelo's David or any of the great artists who do form a human form. But there is an advantage to this, which the artists like Michelangelo could not do, and that is, as I say, in fact, I've always thought that sculptures like this, and there are other people that do abstract sculptures, they should be viewed on a turntable so that you see them continuously turning. You should be able to go into a museum and there should be chairs and whatever abstract sculptures on display, they should all be slowly rotating so that you look over here and you see that view, then there's another view, then there's another view. It's something like a symphony. You cannot understand a symphony just by playing the opening chord. You have to listen to it all the way through. And anyway, this type of art is different. You can understand Michelangelo's David almost entirely by a one-sided view of it, or two-sided view, actually. So there is something to be said for abstract sculpture. So,
I have a question.
okay.
Sorry. What are your sculptures made out of?
Okay, we'll go through that when we go upstairs. These are made out of plywood, but they are actually models. I hope to have them translated into steel. I am planning very shortly to take them to a steel fabricator because as it is, they deteriorate outside very quickly. So those are going to be made. Now those over there, you see all those sculptures over there on the porch, on the veranda, that's cast polyester with metal, powdered metal in them. The silver ones have powdered aluminum. The metallic ones have powdered bronze in them. So I have kind of discarded that technique because those sculptures are extremely heavy. These are very, very light. I can move those by myself. Those I have to have help with, which is why I don't have them out in the field. Eventually I will put them outside. Okay, any other questions before we go take a tour?
I have one last one.
Okay,
So,
Lawrence.
That one way in the corner, it doesn't have the three. I don't see it. I see the round part, but I don't see the triangle and the square.
Oh, the one that looks like a Madonna and Child.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
yeah.
thought it was.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a Madonna and Child.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, that was another theme I did pursue for a while. I said one of the things you can do is you can combine two natural forms. In other words, if you look at that, it's also like a hand or a Madonna. And I did quite a few of those with that. In other words, it looks like a combination of a hand and a Madonna. Can you see the two different forms?
Now you point it out,
yeah, you combine two different forms, and that way you get the meaning of both forms in one. So I pursued that quite a while too.
I have a question.
Okay.
So they're all like sharp edges, sharp and points.
Yes.
And then there's some circles, but there's nothing soft about the human form. So.
Oh, okay. I know what you.
I mean, I'm not like, when I look at something like that, I don't right away see the human form.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's more geometric or something.
It could be that is that detracts from it. I will show you some upstairs in which I did use rounded forms, and I never really pursued that as far as maybe I should have. So that's an interesting comment. Thanks, Roxanne. Okay, anybody else before we go up and take a tour?
I got one.
Okay.
Okay, on each sculpture, do you have something written on what inspired you to do it? Or?
Well, I don't, and I don't even have titles on them, but you're right, that's what I should do, and I haven't done that yet. Eventually, I plan to open this as a gallery and open it up at least one day a week. That's my plan, and I haven't done that yet, but I'm almost there. And for that, I will have to put titles, I'll have to put when they were made, the material, and the meaning. You're right. I've got to do that eventually. So, okay, everybody.